All right, wizards, if you do me a favor and look over this document and watch the screencast, study this for Wednesday. This is when we're going to do this officially, and this will be something that you'll be quizzed on Friday. So we're going to compare two population proportions, and we're going to estimate the difference using a confidence interval, which means we're going to use Panic. That's our memory aid, our mnemonic device. So I've got the Cartoon Network. They conduct this nationwide survey to see if there's a the percent of boys and girls who like Superman. Out of 400 boys, 40% of the boys like Superman. Out of the 300 girls, only 30% like Superman. And they want to estimate this difference between the two population proportions with 90% confidence. So P in Panic. That's your parameter statement. You're kind of restating the problem. I want to estimate the true difference in the population proportions of boys who like Superman and girls who like Superman. And I want to do this with 90% confidence. So there's your P statement. When you check your conditions, you must check the conditions for both groups. Both groups need to meet the conditions. So the 400 boys were randomly selected and the 300 girls were randomly selected. Out of the 400 boys, 160 boys said they liked Superman, 240 did not. That's the 40% and 60%. Both are greater than 10, so that sample of boys is large enough. On the girls' side, 30% said they liked Superman, so that's 90. 90 girls liked Superman, 210 did not. Both of those are greater than 10, so the sample of girls is large enough. And certainly, 400 boys is less than 10% of the population of boys who watch Cartoon Network, and 300 girls is probably less than 10% of the population of girls who watch the Cartoon Network. And then the last condition we need to check is the groups need to be independent. Typically when it's boys and girls, if there's a mix in genders, they typically are independent groups. But the idea is that the chance that a boy likes Superman is independent, has no bearing on the probability that a girl likes Superman. So we need to state that the two groups are independent or this stuff doesn't work. We need independent groups so we can compute the standard deviation. We'll talk where all that stuff comes from on Wednesday. So N is the name your interval statement. So the conditions have been met. So I will construct a 2 proportion Z interval with 90% confidence to estimate the true difference in the population proportions of boys who like Superman and girls who like Superman. So this stuff right here, this is all of the information I've gathered. 400 boys, 160 of them like Superman. That's a p-hat of 0.4 for boys. 300 girls, 90 girls like Superman. That's a p-hat for the girls of 0.3. And the difference in that p-hats, those p-hats, the proportion of boys and the proportion of girls is 0.1. That's our point estimate. That's the best estimate we have for the difference in the two population proportions. So now I'm going to refer to my formula sheet. So confidence interval is a statistic plus or minus the critical value times the standard deviation of the statistic. And the standard deviation of the statistic of that difference is given by this formula here. Whoa! Not a big deal, guys. I did my inverse normal command on the calculator to get the critical value, 1.645. And so what I did here is I just literally set up my confidence interval. See if I can get off that. So 0.1 is my point estimate, plus or minus 1.645 is my critical value, times this thing here is just this thing here with all of my numbers plugged in. So 0.4 times 0.6 divided by 400, 0.4 times 0.6 divided by 400, 0.3 times 0.7 divided by 300, 0.3 times 0.7 divided by 300. It's possible that you can do all of this on your calculator too. So if you go to your menu page, go to confidence intervals and select number 6, which is your 2 proportion Z interval. And this is where you go 6, 6, 6. And so I put in the number of successes for boys and the sample size for boys, the successes for girls and the sample size for girls. So this may or may not work, man. If sometimes you get a p-hat and the p-hat doesn't produce an integer value, this tool only takes integer values. So if they're not integers, you're kind of out of luck. My confidence interval is 0.9. And so that leaves me this information. So I can set up my confidence interval using a point estimate plus or minus my margin of error, or I can get my interval from the C lower and the C upper. So I am 95% confident that the true difference in the population proportion of boys who like Superman and girls who like Superman is between 0.041 and 0.159. So that is my I statement, showing my interval and interpreting the interval in context. My conclusion: between 4.1% and 15.9% more boys than girls like Superman. That is my conclusion. On the calculator, if you're interested, here we go. Menu, statistics, confidence intervals, 2 proportions the interval. 160 successes and 400 was my sample size. 90 successes and 300 was my sample size. And I changed that to 0.9. And there you go, everything I need. So wizards, please study this for Wednesday so you come into class kind of prepared to talk about this. You've been doing confidence intervals, so this is not a big deal. And you did a great job writing up your confidence intervals on the quiz last week. So I think this is just the next step, which will be a very manageable step for you guys to take. Hope this has been helpful, wizards, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow.